Would you trade 5 years of your life for a lifetime of luxury, even if it costs you your soul? Hi, family. I want you to comment below with your answer. And also, I will appreciate it if you can subscribe to my channel. It will help me grow and keep me going. Lori Richards had never thought the question would belong to her until the night she first met Luca Perry. It was supposed to be an ordinary evening, or as ordinary as life could be when you were drowning in debts that never seemed to end. Her mother's hospital bills, the rent she couldn't pay, the dream she had shelved because survival had taken priority, all of it had caged her. That night, she wore a borrowed black dress that hung too loosely on her shoulders, serving drinks at an exclusive auction where fortunes were spent on art pieces she couldn't even pronounce. The room shimmered with power, not the shallow kind that came from shiny chandeliers or glittering dresses, but the kind that wrapped itself around men like armor, the kind that bought silence, bought countries, bought destinies. And then there was him, Luca Perry. He didn't need to announce his presence. The air did that for him. The crowd shifted when he walked in, as though gravity itself leaned toward him. Tall, sharp-featured, his suit cut to perfection, yet understated in a way that screamed wealth without asking for applause. His eyes were ice gray, unreadable, the kind that didn't look at you, but through you. Lori noticed the whispers first, about his billion-dollar empire that stretched from private shipping fleets to vineyards in Italy, about his rumored ruthlessness, about how every man wanted his power and every woman wanted his attention. Lori wanted neither. She just wanted to finish her shift, go home, and figure out how to beg her landlord for another week's grace. But fate was a cruel thing. Their first conversation wasn't supposed to happen. A drunk man grabbed Lori's wrist, yanking her backward, nearly spilling champagne on a priceless painting. She gasped, pulling away, but the man's grip tightened. Before she could speak, a shadow loomed, and suddenly the man's hand was gone, his drunken protest cut short by Luca's voice. Low, commanding, dangerous. Let her go. The words weren't loud, but they carried the weight of finality. The man obeyed, retreating with muttered apologies. Lori, her pulse racing, found herself staring into those gray eyes. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw curiosity flicker there, though it was gone as quickly as it came. Thank you, she whispered, her voice trembling. He didn't answer. He simply studied her, as though assessing her worth, as though calculating something invisible. Then, just as quickly, he walked away. Lori should have been relieved. Instead, she felt unnerved. The next day, her life changed. She received a call from an unknown number. The voice on the line was deep, steady. Miss Richards, this is Luca Perry. I have a proposal for you. She almost dropped her phone. I think you have the wrong number. I don't make mistakes. There was no arrogance in his tone, just certainty. I want to meet. Tonight, 10 o'clock. The address will be sent. Every instinct screamed to say no, but curiosity, desperation, and something she couldn't name forced her to agree. When the black car came to pick her up, she almost didn't get inside. But she did. The meeting was in a private estate outside the city. No glitz, no media, no gawking eyes. Just silence and wealth that whispered from every stone of the sprawling villa. Lori was led into a library so vast it could have been mistaken for a museum. There by the fire, he sat, looking as untouchable as ever. He motioned for her to sit. I'll be direct, he said. I want you to be mine. Her breath caught. Excuse me. Not in the way you think, Luca continued calmly. I need someone by my side. Someone presentable. Someone who can be seen, photographed, smiled at, but trusted to know her place. I want you to be that person. She laughed, a short, nervous sound. You want me to be your what? Girlfriend? Mistress? Partner, he corrected. Publicly, my partner. Privately, he paused, eyes hardening. Privately, you'll follow rules. In return, you'll have 5 years of security. Financial freedom. Anything you need. Her stomach churned. Why me? Because you have nothing to lose, he said without hesitation. And people with nothing to lose are the most loyal. Lori felt her chest tighten. He wasn't wrong. She had nothing. No savings. No fallback. Just desperation. But his words carried a shadow. And after 5 years, she asked quietly, you walk away. Lucas said simply, debt-free, wealthy, whatever you desire. The contract ends. No ties, no questions. A lifetime of problems solved. Her mother's bills paid. A chance at dreams she'd buried. All for 5 years of her life. It sounded too simple, too dangerous. I don't even know you, she whispered. You don't need to know me, he replied. You only need to agree. She stared at him. His expression was unreadable, but there was a glimmer in his eyes, something hidden. Loneliness? Darkness? She couldn't tell. Her heart pounded. Her mind screamed no, but her lips trembled with the weight of yes. That night, Lori Richards signed away 5 years of her life. At first, it was surreal. Within days, she was lifted from her shabby apartment into a new existence. Not a penthouse, not something predictable. No, Luca had his own vision of luxury. She was flown to a secluded villa carved into the cliffs of Santorini, where the ocean stretched endless and blue beneath their balcony. She was given gowns tailored in silence by designers who never asked questions, jewelry that sparkled like stolen stars, and a passport filled with destinations she never dreamed she'd see. She dined not under chandeliers, but under skies lit by fireworks over the Nile. She walked barefoot across marble courtyards older than her country. She listened to secrets whispered in boardrooms where men discussed empires worth billions. But beneath the glitter of her new life, Lori felt the chains of the deal tightening. She wasn't free. Every smile, every gesture, every touch in public was calculated. Luca was always in control, his rules absolute. She was his shadow, his shield, his possession. Yet at night, when they were alone, something shifted. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't tender either, but there were moments when he looked at her too long, when his hand lingered on hers, when silence felt heavier than words. And slowly, dangerously, Lori found herself wondering, was she living the deal, or was she falling into something else entirely? She told herself it was just survival. She told herself it was just business. But as the weeks passed, as she learned the rhythm of his world and the whispers of his enemies, as she felt the warmth of his hand on the small of her back in crowded rooms, her heart betrayed her. Because 5 years was the deal. But even then, Lori knew that 5 years would never be enough. Lori Richards had thought she understood the scale of Luca Perry's world after her first weeks with him. But Act 2 of her life in his orbit was far grander, darker, and more dangerous than anything she could have imagined. Entering his world was not about red carpets or magazine covers, the kind she used to dream about when she was younger and naive. No, entering Luca's world meant stepping into the heart of wealth that was so vast it swallowed entire governments, whispered to presidents, toppled companies with a single phone call. He didn't flaunt it in glittering lights or boastful parties. He displayed it in silence, in his reach, in the way doors opened where laws should have stood firm. And Lori was expected to move with him like shadow and flame, flawlessly composed, a partner molded by invisible rules. The first true taste of his empire came on the deck of the Solace, a ship not simply a yacht, but a floating fortress, 80 meters of glass, steel, and secrets. It wasn't covered in crystal chandeliers or ostentatious decor. Instead, its beauty was quiet, restrained, designed for business conducted far from prying eyes. As the Mediterranean stretched endlessly around them, men with fortunes written in oil and steel gathered, women adorned in gowns tailored with hidden armor against betrayal, and Lucas stood among them as though he were not merely a man, but the axis on which their ambitions turned. Lori wore an emerald silk gown that clung to her frame, her hair styled not for vanity, but to project elegance. Every detail of her presence had been curated by Luca's silent army of stylists, strategists, and advisors, but it was her task to make it look natural, effortless. She felt the weight of every gaze upon her, evaluating her as they evaluated everything around Luca. Was she weak? Was she a liability? Could she be turned against him? Lori had to be flawless. She had to smile at men who would see her as nothing but another pawn, nod politely at women whose eyes carried knives, and all the while remain steady at Luca's side as though none of it pierced her. But behind the perfection lay danger. She realized it in the way Cole Hall, one of Luca's most dangerous rivals, lingered too long when he kissed her hand in greeting. His smile was sharp, his voice smooth, his gaze taunting as it flicked toward Luca before returning to her. "So this is the woman who holds your attention, Perry," Cole drawled, his tone drenched with mockery. "She's unexpected." Lori felt Luca's hand tighten ever so slightly around hers. "My choices are not for discussion," Luca replied coolly, his eyes never leaving Cole's. There was no raised voice, no obvious threat, but Lori felt the storm brewing beneath his calm exterior. The two men exchanged pleasantries that were anything but polite, and all the while Lori stood there, aware that she was not just decoration. She was the weak point Luca's enemies would attempt to exploit. That night, when the others had retreated to their suites, Lori found herself alone with Luca on the deck, the sea wind whipping against her face. She wanted to speak, to ask why he had chosen her for this life when surely anyone else could have played the role better. But before she could, he turned to her, his expression unreadable. "You're not afraid of him," Lucas said quietly. Lori swallowed. "Should I be? Everyone should be afraid of Cole Hall," Luca replied. His eyes studied her, piercing through her carefully composed mask. "But you stood there like you belonged. That matters." His words lingered, not quite praise, but close enough to warm her. Yet beneath them was something else, something heavier. She realized that her performance was not just about appearances. It was survival, not only for her, but for him. One wrong move, one misplaced smile, and she could bring ruin. Days turned into weeks, and Lori's education in Luca's world deepened. She was taught how to read contracts with hidden daggers in the fine print, how to smile at enemies without ever blinking, how to step into a room and control the narrative without speaking more than a handful of words. Karen Hall, Luca's legal strategist, became her unlikely mentor, sharp-eyed and unsparing. "You're not here to be pretty," Karen told her one evening as they reviewed documents in a villa overlooking the Aegean. "You're here to be unshakable. Remember that." But for every lesson, there were tests. Diane Haunt, Luca's former lover, returned like a specter, her beauty icy, her presence venomous. She cornered Lori in a marble corridor of a Venetian palazzo where negotiations were taking place. "You're temporary," Diane hissed, her lips curving into a cruel smile. "They all are. He'll tire of you, and when he does, you'll be nothing but a memory he paid off." Lori's chest tightened, but she forced herself to lift her chin. "If that's true," she said softly, "then you must still be waiting for him to tire of me." The flash of anger in Diane's eyes told her she had struck true, but Lori also knew she had painted a target on her back. The danger grew more tangible when Barbara Fox, a socialite known for trading gossip like currency, leaked a set of photographs showing Lori alone with Cole Hall. They were harmless enough, just moments captured at the yacht gathering. But framed by Barbara's poisonous words, they painted Lori as a traitor. The whispers spread fast, reaching even Luca's ears. For the first time since she signed the contract, Lori saw doubt in his gaze. That night, in the silence of his estate in Corsica, he confronted her. His voice was low, deadly calm. "Were you working with him?" The accusation pierced her like a blade. "No, Luca, I would never." "You think loyalty is free?" His voice sharpened. "In my world, loyalty is bought, stolen, tested. Everyone has a price." "And what about you?" she shot back, her own voice trembling. "Did you think I agreed to this just for money? You think I signed away 5 years of my life because I wanted your world? I did it to survive. But surviving doesn't mean betraying you." For a long moment, they stared at each other, the firelight flickering between them. Then, slowly, his expression shifted. Not softened. Luca Perry did not soften, but something changed in his eyes. A crack in the armor, a glimpse of the man beneath the empire. "Then prove it," he said quietly. "Prove your loyalty. Because if you can't, Lori, this contract ends here." And just like that, she realized the true cost of the deal. It wasn't 5 years of her life. It wasn't luxury or freedom or money. It was her soul, balanced on a knife's edge, in a world where love was dangerous, betrayal was fatal, and survival meant becoming something she never thought she could be. But as she stood there, her heart pounding, her eyes locked on his, Lori also realized something terrifying. She didn't want to just survive him anymore. She wanted to save him. And perhaps, more dangerously, she wanted him to save her too. Rivals in the shadows had always circled Luca Perry, but it wasn't until Lori stood at his side that she truly understood how dangerous they could be. Cole Hall became more than just a whispered name. He became a looming presence, the kind of man who smiled with venom hidden in his teeth. Every encounter with him felt like stepping onto a chessboard where she was the pawn and Luca the king, and Cole had every intention of toppling them both. The first time she saw him after Barbara Fox's carefully planned scandal, it was at a closed negotiation in Zurich, far away from paparazzi and glittering lights. The meeting was held in an abandoned monastery that had been repurposed for power plays like this. Stone walls centuries old, silence so thick it echoed. Lori stood slightly behind Luca, her role clear, composed, elegant, untouchable. But when Cole entered, his eyes found her instantly, and his smile stretched slow, deliberate, as if the scandal had been his personal gift to her. "Perry," Cole said, his voice smooth, his handshake firm. "And the beautiful Miss Richards. A pleasure to see you both again." His eyes lingered on Lori, mocking, taunting. "I hear the photographs caused quite the stir. Tell me, did she pass your little test?" Luca didn't flinch. He never did. His expression remained unreadable, but Lori could feel the sharpness in his stillness, like a blade waiting to strike. "My affairs are not your concern," Luca said coolly. "On the contrary," Cole replied, pouring himself a glass of wine as if he owned the room. "Everything about you is my concern. You and I, we don't just compete, we exist in the same blood. When you bleed, Perry, I feel it. And when I see her," he turned his gaze back to Lori, his smirk deepening, "I see a wound waiting to open." Lori's pulse quickened, but she held his stare. She refused to give him the satisfaction of her fear. Yet inside, she trembled. The way he spoke, the way he toyed with words, it wasn't casual. It was calculated, a warning dressed as charm. Later that night, Luca's silence was heavier than usual. They stayed in a mountain villa that overlooked the Swiss Alps, snow cascading down the glass windows, the fire burning low. Lori wanted to speak, to ask why Cole hated him so fiercely, but Luca gave nothing away. It wasn't until she whispered, "What did he mean about bleeding?" that Luca finally looked at her. "Cole Hall doesn't want my empire," Luca said after a long pause. "He wants me, broken, humiliated, erased, and he thinks you're the key." Lori's breath caught. "Because I'm weak?" No, Luca's eyes hardened. "Because you matter." The words struck her with more force than she expected. She wanted to deny it, to remind herself this was just a deal, a contract. But the way his voice softened ever so slightly on the last word told her something had shifted. She mattered, even if neither of them could afford to admit it. But enemies weren't only outside. Diane Haunt lingered like poison in the air, weaving herself into events where she had no invitation. Her connection to Luca was old, tangled in history Lori couldn't fully unravel, but one thing was clear, Diane would never let go willingly. She cornered Lori again, this time in the quiet hallway of an estate in Monaco where negotiations with foreign dignitaries were taking place. Diane's perfume was sharp, her smile sharper. "Do you really think you can survive this world?" she whispered, her voice low, intimate. "You think wearing his diamonds makes you untouchable? You'll drown, Lori. Men like Luca don't love, they devour. And when he's finished with you, you'll wish you never signed that contract." Lori clenched her fists, every word slicing through her confidence. "If he devours me," she said softly, "at least he'll remember my taste." For a brief second, Diane's composure cracked, rage flashing in her eyes, before she spun away with a hiss of contempt. But Lori knew what she had done. She had made an enemy far more personal than Cole Hall. The pressure only grew when Barbara Fox returned to the stage, spinning gossip into daggers. She cornered Lori at a vineyard gathering in Tuscany, her laughter cruel. "Do you know what the whispers are now?" Barbara purred. That you're the reason Luca is distracted, that he's losing his edge because of you. And in his world, distraction means death. Lori's chest tightened. She had wanted to believe she was strong enough to walk in his world. But what if her presence was his undoing? That night, as Luca worked late in his study, Lori stood alone on the balcony, the Tuscan hills rolling dark under the moonlight. She asked herself a question she wasn't ready to face. Was she saving him, or was she the weapon his enemies were using to destroy him? Her answer came in the most unexpected way. A message arrived on her private phone, one Luca had given her, one no one else should have access to. The text was simple, chilling. He can't protect you. Meet me tomorrow. Alone. The sender was anonymous, but Lori knew instantly. It was Cole. Fear coiled in her stomach, but beneath it was something sharper, resolve. She would not run. She would not hide. If Cole thought she was Luca's weakness, she would prove otherwise. The next day, she slipped out under the guise of a morning walk, meeting Cole in a secluded garden outside Florence. He stood waiting, smug, confident, as though she were already his pawn. "Brave," he said, clapping slowly. "Or foolish. Do you know what it means to stand here without him?" Lori lifted her chin. "It means I'm not afraid of you." He laughed, the sound cold. "Oh, but you should be. You think Luca Perry is untouchable, but I know his cracks. And you, my dear Lori, are the deepest one. Sooner or later, he will choose his empire over you. And when that day comes, I'll be waiting to catch the pieces." His words twisted inside her, planting seeds of doubt she didn't want to acknowledge. She turned to leave, but his final words followed her like a curse. 5 years, sweetheart. 5 years, and he'll let you go. And when he does, I'll be the one standing here, offering you forever. She walked away without answering, but her heart thundered with a truth she couldn't silence. Cole wasn't just an enemy to Luca. He was a shadow that had already entwined itself around her fate. And as she returned to Luca's side that evening, she realized the contract she had signed wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about choosing between two men, one who owned her life, and one who threatened to own her soul. And worst of all, deep down, she feared that either choice could destroy her. The week that followed became a storm Lori had not anticipated. She had survived the first clash of wills with Luca Perry, but his silence afterward was louder than any insult. She expected him to come back, to remind her of the contract, to flaunt his control. Instead, he did nothing. That nothing unsettled her more than his arrogance ever had. He disappeared into his empire, and she was left with silence, with too much space to think. She would catch herself glancing at her phone, waiting for a message that never came, waiting for the sharp click of his shoes down the marble corridor, waiting for something. And in that waiting, an uneasy truth unfolded. She missed him, not as a master or an owner, but as a man who had begun to stir emotions she had promised herself not to feel. When he finally returned, it was not with words but with chaos. She was at the conservatory, her hands lingering over the ivory keys of the grand piano, when the doors burst open and Cole Hall rushed in. Cole, Luca's right hand, the man who carried his secrets and enforced his orders. His voice was sharp, urgent. "Lori, come with me now." She stood, startled by the rawness of his tone. "What's happening?" He did not answer. His eyes flickered, unwilling to meet hers. He only extended a hand, and in that silence she understood. Something was wrong. Minutes later, she was in the back of the bulletproof car, the city blurring past. Cole's jaw was clenched, his phone buzzing endlessly with calls he ignored. Finally, she demanded, "Tell me the truth. Where is Luca?" Cole hesitated, then exhaled. Someone tried to breach the Harbor Heights estate. Security neutralized it, but he stopped, searching for the right words. "But Luca thinks you were the target." Lori's blood ran cold. She leaned back, her pulse roaring in her ears. "Me?" she whispered. The weight of those 5 years pressed harder than ever. What kind of life had she tied herself to? What shadows had she invited in her world by saying yes to that contract? When the car finally stopped, it wasn't at the villa, but at one of Luca's hidden estates, a fortress of glass and steel on a private island reachable only by his helicopters. The silence of the ocean surrounded them, broken only by the hum of the rotor blades fading away as the helicopter departed. She stepped inside, the walls too pristine, the space too empty. Then she heard him. His voice, low and firm, carried across the hall. "Leave us." Luca emerged from a corridor, and his security detail melted away instantly. His suit jacket was gone, his sleeves rolled up, the sharpness of his features softened by exhaustion. His eyes locked on hers, and for a moment neither moved. "They were close," he said, his voice rough, like gravel dragged across stone. "Closer than I ever wanted them to be. And you—" He stopped, running a hand through his hair. "You don't understand what being tied to me means." She forced herself to meet his gaze, her voice trembling but steady enough to pierce the silence. "Then explain it. Because all I have is a contract and shadows." He crossed the space between them in 2 strides, gripping her shoulders, not harshly this time, but with urgency, with desperation. "It means you are no longer just a woman I made a deal with. You are the weakness they'll use against me. You are the one thing I cannot afford to lose." The words cracked something in her. She wanted to deny it, to push him away, but her body betrayed her. Her heart beat faster, her breath hitched, and for the first time, she saw not the billionaire titan, but a man terrified of losing something he had not expected to value. She whispered, her voice breaking, "I never asked to be your weakness." His jaw tightened. He released her shoulders slowly, his hands lingering as though reluctant to let go. "No, you didn't. And that makes it worse." That night, she cannot sleep. She lay in the vast bed of the island estate, staring at the ceiling while the sound of waves crashed against the cliffs below. Every moment of silence stretched into eternity, every thought clawing at her. Why her? Why now? Why did his words feel less like chains and more like a truth she had been running from? Hours later, she rose, slipping into the glass-walled atrium that overlooked the sea. She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering though the night was warm. And then she saw him. Luca stood at the far edge of the terrace, a silhouette against the horizon, staring into the endless black of the ocean. His posture was rigid, but there was something broken in the way his shoulders bent. She approached slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you ever regret it?" He did not turn. "Regret what?" "The contract. Us. Binding me to you." A long pause stretched between them, filled only by the crashing waves. Finally, he said, "Every day." Her chest tightened, the words slicing through her. But then he turned, his eyes burning with a fierceness that unraveled her. "And every night, I thank the universe for it. Because without it, I wouldn't have you here. And without you here, I would already be dead." The confession shattered her defenses. Suspense mingled with longing, fear twisted with desire, and in that storm she knew one thing with certainty. This was no longer just a deal, no longer just survival. It was becoming something far more dangerous, something that neither of them could walk away from, no matter how high the cost. And as the night deepened, Laurie Richards realized that the real suspense wasn't the enemies outside, but the battle inside her own heart, whether to keep resisting or to finally surrender to the billionaire who was never meant to be hers. The confession lingered in the night air, raw and unsettling, and Laurie's chest rose and fell with the weight of it. For a long moment, she could not speak. The man before her, the billionaire who commanded cities and controlled markets with a single phone call, looked at her not with arrogance, but with something dangerously close to vulnerability. It terrified her more than his power ever had. She turned away, hugging her arms tighter, fighting the wave of emotions flooding through her. But Luca was relentless, stepping closer, closing the space between them until she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "You think this is a game, Laurie?" His voice was lower now, almost a growl. 5 years, a contract, luxury. Do you really think that was all it ever was? She swallowed hard, her voice shaking as she replied, "It was supposed to be. That was the deal. No feelings, no danger, just 5 years." He laughed bitterly, running a hand through his hair as if mocking himself. "I thought I could keep it that way." I thought I could keep you caged in my world and remain untouched. But you burned through every wall I built. And now, the people I've kept at bay, the enemies who would never dare touch me, they're circling because of you." Her heart stung at his words, but then he reached for her hand, gripping it tightly, his touch firm, almost desperate. "Not because you're a liability, but because you matter. Don't you see? The moment they realize you're my weakness, you become the most valuable target in this entire game." Lori's knees almost buckled. She wanted to fight him, to push back, but her pulse betrayed her, pounding with an ache she didn't want to acknowledge. She tried to steady her breath, tried to keep her voice steady. "And what happens when the 5 years are up, Luca? Do I just disappear from your empire, from your life? Do you let me go back to who I was, as if none of this ever happened?" He stepped closer still, so close she could feel his breath on her skin, his gaze searing through her. "Do you really think I'd let you walk away that easily?" The words struck her like a physical blow. She opened her mouth to respond, but the moment was shattered by the shrill buzz of Luca's encrypted phone vibrating on the terrace table. He cursed under his breath, snatched it up, and turned his back to her. Lori listened to the clipped, urgent exchange of words she could barely understand. Something about a breach, an inside leak, a name she didn't recognize. His voice hardened, colder than ice, and when he ended the call, he stood motionless for a moment, gripping the phone so tightly his knuckles whitened. She whispered, "What is it?" He turned, his expression unreadable, but his eyes, those stormy, piercing eyes, were filled with fury. "Someone close to me betrayed us, and they know more about you than they should." Lori's breath caught. Her world tilted. Her first thought was survival. Was she even safe here? But beneath the fear was something far more dangerous, the flicker of trust. He hadn't hidden the truth from her. He had let her in. The night stretched on in silence after that. He assigned 2 of his most trusted men to guard her chamber door, and though he disappeared into his private command room, she could still feel his presence everywhere, pulling at her, unraveling her resolve. Hours later, unable to fight the restlessness, Lori found herself wandering toward the sound of faint music echoing through the hall. She followed it and discovered Lucas seated at a grand ebony piano, his fingers brushing over the keys with surprising tenderness, the melody aching with loneliness. She lingered in the shadows, watching him, until the emotion overwhelmed her. Slowly, she stepped forward. He paused, his head lifting as he noticed her. For a long moment, they only stared at each other, the silence more intimate than any touch. And then she whispered, "You don't have to carry it all alone." The mask slipped again. For the second time that night, she saw not the billionaire, not the man who had bought 5 years of her life, but the wounded soul underneath. He rose, crossing to her, his eyes burning with a storm she could no longer escape. His hand cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheek, as if afraid she would vanish. "You think I'm strong because of what I own. But the truth is, Lori, I'm only strong because you're here." Her heart broke and mended all at once, every wall she had built collapsing in a single heartbeat. And though she wanted to resist, though she wanted to cling to the remnants of the life she had before him, her body betrayed her. Her lips parted in a trembling breath, and before she could think, before she could stop herself, she leaned into him. The kiss that followed was not gentle. It was fire, it was desperation, it was 5 years of unspoken longing and denial exploding into something undeniable. His arms pulled her closer, his grip fierce, as though he could anchor her to him and shield her from every shadow that hunted them. When they finally broke apart, breathless and trembling, she stared at him with wide eyes, realizing that this was the point of no return. She was no longer the woman fulfilling a contract. She was the woman entangled in the heart of a billionaire whose world was as dangerous as it was intoxicating. And as the waves crashed outside the glass walls of the estate, Lori Richards understood the true suspense was not just in the enemies at their door, but in the terrifying, exhilarating truth that she had already fallen for him. Morning broke over the island estate in streaks of gold and silver, the kind of sunrise that made the sea look like molten treasure. Yet inside, Lori felt no peace. She woke with the memory of Luca's kiss still searing her lips, her body betraying her with the aching need to feel it again. But as much as her heart wanted to linger in the heat of that moment, her mind whispered danger. This wasn't love, not yet. It was fire, and fire could burn her alive. She rose, wrapping herself in one of the silk robes Luca had provided, and wandered down the glass hallways. The estate was eerily quiet, too quiet for her comfort. Guards were posted at every corner, their eyes sharp, their movements tense. Something had shifted since last night. When she found Luca, he wasn't the vulnerable man at the piano anymore. He was the billionaire warlord again, commanding, sharp, dangerous. He stood in front of a towering wall of screens, surveillance feeds flickering in constant motion. Cole Hall stood beside him, his expression unreadable, while Aiden Brown, another of Luca's inner circle, scrolled through data on a tablet. Lori lingered at the threshold, unnoticed for a moment, until Luca's gaze found her. For an instant, the mask slipped, his eyes softened, a flicker of the man who had confessed weakness to her. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "You should have stayed in bed," he said, his voice low, controlled. She lifted her chin, refusing to be dismissed. "I want to know what's happening. No more secrets." Cole shifted, his jaw tightening as if the words offended him. Luca ignored Cole's glance and gestured for her to come closer. On the central screen was a still image of a man she did not recognize, tall, sharp features, an aura of menace in the way he stared at the camera. Luca's voice was clipped. "Vincent Haunt, my rival. Ruthless. Brilliant. He's been circling for years, waiting for me to bleed. And now he's found his way in." Lori frowned. "And how?" Luca's jaw flexed. "Through someone close. Someone feeding him information. Someone in this room." Her heart lurched. The words hung heavy in the air. Cole stiffened beside him. Aiden's eyes flickered briefly, but neither man spoke. Lori's chest tightened as she looked between them. Luca turned, pacing the floor like a predator in a cage. "Last night's breach wasn't random. They knew exactly where we'd be, and they knew about Lori." Silence followed, thick and suffocating. Then Luca's gaze landed on Cole, and Lori's stomach dropped. Cole, who had dragged her from the conservatory, who had saved her from the danger. Could he be the one? Cole's lips curved into a humorless smile. "You think I betray you after all these years?" Luca didn't answer, but the look in his eyes was darker than any words. Lori stepped forward, her voice trembling but firm. "Why would anyone betray you? You treat loyalty like gold. You protect the people close to you." Cole's jaw twitched. "Not everyone wants protection, Miss Richards. Some want power." The way he said it sent a chill crawling down her spine. Luca's hand brushed over the glass table, and with a press of a button, a new feed opened. The footage was grainy, from a hidden camera, but clear enough. Cole's figure leaning across a shadowed table, his face half hidden as he exchanged documents with a man whose profile matched Vincent Haunt's. Lori gasped softly, her hand flying to her mouth. Luca didn't move. He simply stared at the man he had once trusted most, the silence stretching into something more dangerous than shouting. Cole finally straightened, his smile fading into resignation. "I knew it would come to this. You can't keep building an empire on fear, Luca. Eventually it crumbles. I was just smart enough to choose the winning side." Luca's voice was ice. "The winning side doesn't exist without me." The two men stood locked in silence, a lifetime of trust and betrayal balanced on a knife's edge. Lori felt her knees weaken, the weight of it pressing into her chest. For the first time, she understood the world she had stepped into. This wasn't luxury. It was survival, dressed in silk and diamonds. And she wasn't just a pawn anymore. She was the prize. Cole's eyes shifted to her, sharp and calculating. And in that moment, she realized the truth. Vincent Haunt didn't just want Luca broken. He wanted her. "She's already mine," Cole said softly, almost like a promise. The words struck through the room like lightning. Luca's entire body went rigid, fury igniting in his eyes as he took a step forward, his voice deadly calm. "Say that again." But Cole didn't. He simply smirked, lifted his hands in mock surrender. and glanced at Lori with a look that made her skin crawl. Luca lunged before she could process it, his fist slamming into Cole's jaw with a crack that echoed off the glass walls. Guards rushed in instantly, but Luca barked a single command: "Stand down." Cole staggered back, blood on his lip, but his eyes burned with a twisted satisfaction. "You can't protect her forever. The contract won't save her. Neither will you." And with that, two guards seized him, dragging him out into the waiting dark of the estate's dungeons. Lori stood frozen, her chest heaving, her mind spinning. The room fell silent again, only the sound of the ocean pounding against the cliffs filling the void. Luca turned to her, his breathing uneven, his knuckles raw. For once, his arrogance was gone. In its place was something rawer, something desperate. He closed the distance between them, gripping her face in his hands, his voice breaking. "This is what I meant, Lori. This is the cost. This is what being mine means." Tears burned her eyes, but she didn't pull away. She whispered through the tightness in her throat, "Then teach me how to survive it. Don't shut me out." His eyes searched hers, storm and fire colliding, and for a moment it felt like the whole world had narrowed to this. Two hearts bound by danger, passion, and a contract that was no longer just business. And as the first light of dawn poured over the glass walls, Lori realized that their story was only just beginning, and the true suspense, the kind that could make or break both of them, was still to come. The island had become a fortress. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter, drones swept the skies, and the once peaceful sound of the ocean now felt like a warning drum beating against the cliffs. Lori Richards no longer moved freely through the estate. Every step she took was shadowed by security. Every glance out the window a reminder that the world outside wanted her gone. But despite the danger, something inside her had shifted. The kiss she had shared with Luca lingered in her chest like fire, and his words, raw, desperate, echoed in her thoughts. She was no longer just fulfilling a contract. She was in the center of a storm, and part of her knew she would never escape unscarred. The storm broke 3 nights later. Lori was in the atrium, the vast space lit by the shimmer of the moon against glass walls, when the alarm sounded, low, resonant, and bone-chilling. She froze, her heart hammering, as men rushed through the halls, their weapons raised. Aiden Brown appeared at her side almost instantly, his expression tense. "Stay behind me. Don't speak. Don't run." His voice was sharp, not unkind but commanding. Before she could respond, the doors to the atrium slid open with deliberate slowness. And there he was, Vincent Haunt. He was nothing like she imagined. No wild fury, no monstrous sneer. Instead, he stepped in with the calm elegance of a man who owned every room he entered. His tailored suit was midnight black, his cufflinks gold, his stride confident but unhurried. His eyes, cold gray, sharp as blades, landed on Lori first. And when he smiled, it wasn't cruel. It was worse. It was calculated. "Miss Richards," he drawled, his voice smooth, silken, dangerous. "So we finally meet." Lori's breath caught in her throat. Aiden moved slightly in front of her, but Vincent's gaze never wavered. He studied her with an unsettling fascination, like a collector appraising the rarest jewel. "I see why Luca broke his own rules," Vincent continued softly. "You're not just a contract. You're the one thing he never accounted for." "Step back," Aiden growled, but Vincent only chuckled, his eyes gleaming with amusement. Then Luca entered. He strode into the atrium like a storm contained in human form. His presence filled the room, his fury barely restrained. His eyes locked onto Vincent, and for a heartbeat, the two men stood in silence, titans measuring each other. The tension was thick enough to choke on. "You've made a mistake," Lucas said, his voice a blade of steel. Vincent smiled, unshaken. "The mistake is yours. You've built an empire too large to protect, and now it crumbles because of her." He nodded toward Lori, and her heart clenched. Luca moved instinctively, stepping between them, shielding her without hesitation. "Touch her, and you'll never see another sunrise." Vincent laughed softly, the sound like poison dripping into wine. "You think this is about touching her?" "No, Luca. This is about watching you unravel. I could kill you, but where's the fun in that? No, I'll let you keep her for now. I'll let you watch as the walls close in, as every deal collapses, as every man you trust crumbles. And when she finally realizes that you can't protect her, she'll walk to me on her own. The words sliced through the air, cruel and deliberate. Lori felt her knees weaken, but Luca's hand found hers, gripping tightly, grounding her. He didn't flinch, didn't falter, but the fire in his eyes burned hotter. "You'll never have her," Lucas said, his voice low, lethal. "Not while I breathe." Vincent tilted his head, his smile fading into something darker. "Then we shall see how long you breathe." With that, he turned on his heel as calmly as he had entered, flanked by shadows Lori hadn't even noticed until now. In seconds, he was gone, leaving behind only the echo of his threat and the suffocating tension in the air. Silence fell. Aiden exhaled, muttering curses under his breath as he signaled the guards to tighten the perimeter. Luca, however, stood still, his grip on Lori's hand unyielding. His jaw was clenched, his chest rising and falling with controlled rage. Finally, Lori spoke, her voice trembling. "He's not going to stop, is he?" Luca turned to her, his eyes softening for the first time since Vincent entered. He brushed his thumb across her knuckles, his voice low but steady. "No, he won't stop until he takes everything. And that means I can't let you out of my sight." Her heart pounded as she looked into his eyes, realizing the depth of what he meant. She wasn't just a contract anymore. She was the center of a war. And though fear coiled inside her, another emotion rose to meet it, something more dangerous, something she couldn't deny anymore. Because the truth was simple. She didn't want him to let her go. That night, as the storm of Vincent's threats loomed closer, Lori Richards made a choice she had never intended to make. She chose Luca Perry, not the billionaire, not the contract, but the man who had placed his empire and his heart at her feet. And deep down, she knew this was only the beginning of a battle that would test not just their survival, but the fragile, burning love growing between them. The night air in Florence was crisp, heavy with the fragrance of jasmine climbing along the villa walls. But Lori's chest felt suffocated by silence. She stood on the balcony of her suite, her eyes tracing the marble fountains below, where the moonlight cast Luca's estate into a haunting silver glow. 5 years. 5 years of being tangled in his shadow, his power, his intoxicating control. And now, with every heartbeat, she felt the truth clawing closer, that their deal was unraveling, that someone wanted her gone, and that Luca was hiding far more than his carefully polished charm revealed. Luca found her there, his steps deliberate, his gaze unreadable in the dark. "Why are you out here alone?" His voice was low, velvet-wrapped steel. Lori turned, refusing to let him see her fear. "Why does it matter, Luca? You always find me anyway, like I'm a piece on your chessboard, waiting for you to move me." His jaw tightened, but instead of anger, his eyes softened, just for a fleeting second. He closed the space between them, his hand brushing a strand of hair from her face, lingering too long to be casual. "Pieces don't look at their player the way you look at me." She wanted to pull away, but her pulse betrayed her. Her breath hitched, and her voice trembled with both defiance and longing. "In what way is that? Like I'm trapped? Like I can't breathe without you? Like you'd burn the whole world down if I asked," he murmured, his lips grazing the air just an inch from hers. "But Lori, that's the problem. Someone else wants to burn you first." Her chest tightened. "Who? Why me?" He didn't answer. Instead, he pressed something cold in her palm. A key, small but heavy, engraved with the Perry family crest. "There's a vault beneath the villa. Tonight, you'll see what I've kept from you. But when you do, Lori, you won't look at me the same." Her fingers curled around the key, fear and curiosity warring inside her. She had begged for honesty, and now he was offering it. But why did it feel like stepping into a trap? Later that night, Luca led her through corridors she'd never seen, deeper beneath the villa than she thought possible. Marble gave way to steel, steel to shadows, until they stood before a door with biometric locks. The vault hummed open, revealing walls lined with files, photographs, ledgers, and screens glowing with surveillance feeds. Lori's stomach dropped. This isn't business, Luca. This is obsession. He didn't flinch. It's survival. He moved past her, pulling a file from the wall and laying it open on the desk. Inside were photographs of her. Lori at events, Lori in Milan, Lori stepping out of her car, even Lori asleep in her room. Every year, every moment, tracked. Her knees buckled, and she gripped the desk to steady herself. You were watching me, even before this deal. Luca's voice was rough, stripped bare. Long before. You were mine before you even said yes. The words ignited something wild inside her. Fear, fury, but also a dangerous ache. Because in his confession, there was no game, no contract, just raw possession. But before she could speak, a sharp alarm pierced the silence. The screens flickered, motion detected in the East Wing. Armed shadows were moving through Luca's estate. Stay here, Luca ordered, pulling a weapon from a hidden drawer. But Lori caught his arm, her voice shaking. No, you've kept me in the dark long enough. If I'm already in your world, then I'm not letting you fight it alone. For a second, the ruthless billionaire hesitated, not as a man who owned empires, but as a man who feared losing her. Then slowly he nodded. Then you stay close. And Lori, his gaze burned into hers. Whatever happens tonight, remember, you're not my contract anymore. You're my reason. Her heart pounded, torn between terror and desire, between wanting to run and wanting to believe him. But as Luca led her out of the vault and into the chaos of the night, Lori knew one thing for certain. The truth about their 5 years together was about to explode. And when it did, nothing, no luxury, no power, no deal would ever be the same. Gunfire shattered the silence of the villa grounds, echoing against the marble walls like thunder from the gods. Lori's heart slammed against her ribs as Luca pulled her through the east corridor, his arm like iron around her waist, his eyes scanning every shadow. His men were already engaged, shouts in Italian slicing through the night as bullets tore into the vines climbing the walls. Lori stumbled, but Luca steadied her, his jaw set with ruthless focus. Don't stop. Don't look back. But she did look back and saw it. A figure, cloaked in black, slipping past the guards with a predator's precision. The intruder wasn't charging like the others. He was moving with purpose, as though he knew exactly where to go. Her blood froze. This wasn't just an attack. This was an inside betrayal. They reached the atrium, where glass skylights framed the stars above, now fractured by the gunfire outside. Luca pressed her against the wall, his breath harsh. Stay hidden here. I'll finish this. No, Lori whispered fiercely, clutching his arm. You said I'm not your contract anymore. Then don't treat me like glass. Let me stand with you. For a heartbeat, he stared at her, torn between instinct and emotion. Then he pressed a weapon into her hand. A sleek black pistol, lighter than she expected but heavy with meaning. Don't hesitate, he murmured. Hesitation kills. The glass above them shattered suddenly as a shadow dropped down, boots striking the marble. Lori gasped, raising her weapon, but the figure stepped into the light, and the world tilted. Karen, Lori's voice cracked. Karen Hall, the woman Lori had once called her friend, her sister in everything but blood, stood there in tactical gear, a gun raised. Her eyes were colder than Lori remembered, her smirk cruel. You always had the life I wanted, Lori, Karen said, her voice dripping venom. 5 years as the billionaire's queen. 5 years in silk and diamonds while I was disposable. But don't worry, I'll end it for you tonight. Lori's knees threatened to give way. Karen, no, this isn't you. Lucas stepped forward, his weapon steady, but his voice low with fury. Of course it's her. I warned you, Lori. Not everyone in your world smiles with loyalty. Some smile with knives. Karen's finger tightened on the trigger, and Lori's scream ripped through the atrium. But Luca moved faster. His shot rang out, sparking against Karen's weapon, knocking it from her hand. The gun skittered across the marble, and Lori found herself moving before she could think. She dove, fingers closing around the cold steel just as Karen lunged at her, tackling her to the ground. The two women struggled, nails and fists, the taste of blood sharp in Lori's mouth. Karen snarled, "You were always the weak one." But Lori's eyes burned with fire, her hands tightening on the weapon. Not anymore. She shoved Karen back, breath ragged, and pointed the gun directly at her former friend. For a moment, the villa fell silent, the battle outside dimmed, the world hanging by a thread. Karen's smirk faltered. "You wouldn't." Lori's hand shook, but her voice was steady now. "Try me." Behind her, Luca's presence was a storm barely restrained. He didn't move, didn't intervene. He was watching her, not as his contract, not as a pawn, but as a woman standing in her own fire. Finally, Karen let out a bitter laugh, raising her hands in mock surrender. "You've changed, Lori. But trust me, you'll never be enough for him. You'll never survive in his world." Before Lori could respond, Luca's men stormed into the atrium, dragging Karen away, her curses trailing behind her like poison in the night. Lori's chest heaved as she lowered the gun, her hands trembling. Luca stepped toward her, slowly, like approaching something fragile yet powerful. His fingers brushed her cheek, wiping away a streak of blood. "You didn't hesitate," he said quietly, pride and danger mingling in his voice. "You were fire." Tears blurred her vision, her voice breaking. "But what if Karen was right? What if I'm not enough for this world of yours?" He tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his burning gaze. "You're more than enough. You're the only thing that makes it bearable. And I swear to you, Lori, whoever comes for you next, friend or foe, they'll have to bury me first." Her breath caught, her heart torn between terror and the raw truth in his eyes. For the first time in 5 years, she didn't feel like she was surviving Luca's world. She felt like she belonged in it. Danger, love, betrayal, and all. But deep down, she also knew the war had only just begun. The villa was quiet again, but not peaceful. Silence, after violence, always carried weight. Like the air itself was holding its breath. Guards swept the grounds, collecting weapons, dragging the bodies of intruders away. The scent of gunpowder clung to the marble walls, and every shattered window reflected the aftermath of war. Lori sat on the edge of the grand staircase, her dress torn, her hands still trembling from the weapon she had held. Karen's words echoed in her skull like a curse. "You'll never be enough for him. You'll never survive his world." She pressed her palms to her face, fighting the tears. 5 years of pretending she was strong, 5 years of believing she could bend without breaking, and yet tonight, everything had cracked wide open. Luca descended the stairs slowly, his black shirt streaked with blood, none of it his own. His eyes found her immediately, as though in the entire villa, she was the only thing worth seeing. "You should rest," he said, his voice hoarse but steady. Lori lowered her hands, meeting his gaze. "Rest? When someone I once trusted just tried to kill me in your home. When you've been hiding vaults of secrets and watching me like prey for years." Her voice trembled with both fury and heartbreak. "Don't tell me to rest, Luca. Tell me the truth." He froze, the words cutting sharper than any bullet. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Luca descended the final step and stood before her, his shadow stretching long across the marble. His hands clenched at his sides, as though wrestling with a choice. Finally, he spoke. "The deal, the 5 years, it wasn't meant to protect you. It was meant to protect me." Lori's lips parted, confusion and betrayal warring in her chest. "Protect you? From what?" His jaw tightened, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried centuries of darkness. "From myself, for what I become without you. You think this world of mine is built on money and luxury, Lori? No, it's built on blood, on enemies who don't sleep, on allies who would slit my throat if I blinked too long. When I saw you, I knew you were light, and light doesn't survive in shadows. So I made a deal with myself. 5 years. That's all I would allow. 5 years to keep you close, to feel alive, and then I'd let you go before the darkness swallowed you whole." Her breath hitched. His words weren't a confession of control. They were a confession of love twisted by fear. Tears blurred her vision. "And what about me, Luca? Did you ever think that maybe the light doesn't want to leave the shadow? That maybe I chose you, even if it burns me alive. His face broke, raw and unguarded. He dropped to his knees before her, taking her trembling hands in his blood-streaked ones. You don't understand. If you stay, they'll come again. Not just Karen. Others. Enemies who want to break me will use you until there's nothing left of you. And his voice cracked. I couldn't survive that. Lori stared at him. The billionaire who owned empires, who commanded men with a glance, kneeling before her like a man stripped of all his power. Her chest ached, torn between fear and the fierce pull in her heart. She cupped his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her tearful gaze. Then don't push me away, Luca. Let me fight with you. Let me bleed with you. If this is your world, then it's mine too now. Not because of a deal, not because of 5 years, but because I love you. Do you hear me? I love you. The words shattered the last wall between them. Luca surged forward, his lips crashing onto hers in a kiss that was not polished or controlled but desperate, aching, alive. His hands pulled her close as though he could fuse her into him, as though letting go would mean death itself. When they broke apart, foreheads pressed together, breath mingling, he whispered, "Then we burn together." But before the moment could settle, one of his men appeared in the doorway, urgency in his eyes. "Signore, the press has it. Someone leaked the deal. They know everything." The world tilted. Lori's heart lurched. The secret they had both fought to contain, the deal that defined their entire relationship, was no longer private. Luca's face hardened instantly, the ruthless billionaire reawakening in his eyes. "Find out who," he ordered, his voice cold as steel. The guard nodded and vanished, leaving silence behind. Lori looked at him, her voice barely a whisper. "If the world knows what happens to us now." Luca turned back to her, his gaze burning like a man who had just realized his empire wasn't the only thing worth protecting. "Now, Lori, we stop surviving. We start fighting. For us." But deep inside, Lori knew this was only the beginning. If the world knew the truth of their 5 years, then enemies weren't the only danger. Scandal, betrayal, and the weight of billions would crush them both. Unless their love was strong enough to burn brighter than all of it. The headlines spread like wildfire across every screen, every glossy magazine, every whispered conversation in Europe's elite circles. 5-year deal with billionaire exposed. Love or contract? Lori Richards, the woman behind Luca Perry's empire. The scandal wasn't just news, it was blood in the water. Enemies circled, allies turned cold, and vultures waited for Luca to fall. Reporters camped outside the gates of the villa, cameras flashing like lightning storms. Lori felt their judgment pressing against her skin every time she stepped to the window. Inside, the air was heavier than ever. Luca moved like a storm, issuing orders, tightening security, silencing leaks. But at night, when the world couldn't see, he sat beside Lori, his hand clasping hers as though the entire empire rested on that grip. One evening, as Florence's skyline glowed golden against the dusk, Lori stood before the floor-to-ceiling window, her reflection trembling in the glass. "It's all out now. Everything. The deal, the contract, the years. They think I was just another arrangement. That I never loved you. That I was bought." Her voice cracked, heavy with the shame of being reduced to scandal. Luca stepped behind her, his reflection dark and commanding against hers. His arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her close, his lips brushing her ear. "Let them think what they want. They don't know what I know. They don't know the woman who held a gun and didn't flinch. The woman who kissed me like fire in the middle of chaos. They don't know my Lori." Tears slipped down her cheeks, but she leaned into him, her heart thundering. "And what happens when the pressure breaks us? When the world forces us apart?" He turned her to face him, his eyes blazing with both love and defiance. "Then let the world burn, because I'm done surviving without you." The words cut through her fear, searing themselves into her chest. And for the first time since the truth had spilled into the light, she believed it. They weren't contract and billionaire anymore. They were just Luca and Lori, two souls who had been tested, scarred, and still chose each other. The following week, Luca took her hand and walked with her, not into secrecy, not into shadow, but straight through the storm. Cameras flashed, questions screamed, scandals swirled, but they didn't break stride. He introduced her not as a contract, not as a kept woman, but as his equal, his love, his partner. And though the world doubted, whispered, and plotted, Lori knew the truth. She hadn't been bought. She had been chosen. And in choosing Luca back, she had rewritten both their fates. As the lights of Florence shimmered behind them and the storm of scandal roared louder, Lori whispered into his ear, steady and unshaken. After 5 years with the billionaire, this is where we begin. And Luca, with a rare smile that only she ever saw, kissed her hand and murmured, "Forever." The world watched. The vultures circled. The empire trembled. But their love, born in shadow, forged in fire, walked boldly into the light.